Welcome, Daniel. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you very much, Sonia. How are
Thank
you?
you so much for being here. I am great. So, this is the power of technology. I did a call out, Daniel replied, and he had an awesome story. I personally am fangirling, so I can't wait to hear everything that you have to say. And on that note, I'm going to give you the stage because I know that we're going to have a really hefty, really conversational panel, and I just want to make sure we're on time. So, Daniel, if you're good, lead us away.
Thank you very much, and hello, everyone. Let me start. Usually, when people hear my title, which is these days head of decentralized governance, which is a bit of a mouthful, really. There are two questions that come up. One is, what the heck do you mean? And the second one often is, how did you end up there? So let me answer both of them together. And it starts often with the story of how I started my career as a chef, which seems a little bit counterintuitive, but I did so about 15 years ago. And I was lucky to end up working for some of the best restaurants in the world, until eventually I joined a place called the Fat Duck Experimental Kitchen here in the UK, where they have a range of restaurants, including one that got voted best restaurant of the world in 2005, and different other innovation things related to the food industry. And as I did my first career going through these different Michelin star restaurants and so on, I was extremely passionate about food, and it was really my first love, so to speak. But something I found there really changed me, and that was that because of the brand that these organizations had, there were people flying from all over the world looking for a job there, looking to join these teams. They were extremely passionate about the innovation, the creativity, the excellence, all of these things that were being, well, literally being cooked there. However, when these people joined, the ideas and the passion they had was quite often transmuted into a sort of glorified assembly line worker. And most of the ideas they had and suggestions would never see the light of day. Instead of that, they would end up reproducing day in, day out, often many hours a day, the desires that the owner of the company had. And the same structure was apparent in all the other organizations that other friends of mine work for, whether they were lawyers or doctors or architects or dancers or really any other sort of career. And as I started to have these conversations, I started to become really passionate about this issue because it was affecting me every day. I had all of these ideas I wanted to put forward, and there wasn't much place to do so. Or whenever there was the place, I didn't necessarily have the tools to bring them to life. It felt in a way that this passion wasn't really welcome. And so as I started to become very frustrated with these, I also started to explore and look for solutions. And I found my second love, which is organization design and governance, realizing that the way we have built our organizations for centuries is rather counterproductive for knowledge work. It's rather counterproductive when we want to come together, ideate. We're putting all of these barriers that say you're part of the organization, you're not. This is private. This shouldn't be shared. You're in this level of the hierarchy, you're below, and so on. And all of these silos that we create that are going counter to the transformation towards knowledge work that we have right now. So eventually I left my career as a chef. I started a new path thinking I could become a sort of organization designer or management consultant, so to speak. And I became this sort of rather funky figure that had a story to tell about food, but that really didn't understand the consulting world. As I was traveling, actually, I ended up at some point in Berlin, and through a range of random connections, I got introduced to a woman, a half Colombian living in the UK, who was heading the system department at Hull University. And I guess perhaps she took pity of me and started teaching me all that she knew about systems thinking, and particularly cybernetics, and introduced me to this community of system thinkers, which in turn then led me to fall into another area that was rather nascent at the time. And I'm talking about hear about 2016, 2017, and the evolution that blockchain technology had at this moment. Now, when we think about blockchain technology, what usually comes to mind is all the finance speculation, all the shit coins, or perhaps now the NFT craze and everything that's going on. But mostly we're thinking about currencies. What's less talked about, what's a little bit under the surface, but is really I feel the tide building, has a lot more to do with the cypherpunk movement. Now, the cypherpunk movement has been part of this industry from the very beginning. And it was a countercultural movement, a little bit inspired by punk anarchist ideals that believed that they could create these parallel systems to the traditional world. And so Bitcoin was born from these ideas, a parallel currency system that didn't rely on nation states. Now, as these currencies started to be created and the whole movement grew and the industry evolved and in a way started to move past these initial ideas, what became very, very prevalent there is the concept of decentralization. And decentralization, which is as much a feature of the technology in that the biggest innovation of blockchain is instead of having a centralized database, is having multiple databases that coordinate to reach a consensus and hence create an environment of security because all the information is shared and is really, really hard to tamper with. So this idea of decentralization also sift into the way these organizations were being managed. Because it came from a countercultural movement, there was a lot of fear of government retaliation and a lot of ideas that if there was only a small group of visible people that were leading the revolution, they would be squashed. So instead of that, they start to ask themselves, how can we create ways to manage this technology that, like the technology itself, are decentralized, where all kinds of different people can contribute, often anonymously, but not necessarily, can contribute ideas, can contribute code, can contribute to coordinating, and so on. And so this led to around this time, to the creation of this idea of the decentralized autonomous organization, meaning a DAO. And the decentralized part, I explained a little bit. The autonomous part mostly comes from the concept that DAOs are essentially a set of code, a set of contracts that allow the people to coordinate, to make decisions. In its most basic form, a DAO is a treasury, a way to store funds, and then a range of governance processes of often democratic processes like direct elections and so on, that permit anyone within the community to contribute ideas and then to work together to figure out which of these ideas are valuable and how we can move ahead and refine them, eventually fund them, turn them into projects, turn them into improvements for the community. Now, what could seem like somewhat of a both novel, but also fairly simple idea. I mean, we're just talking about a treasury with a way to manage that treasury, has very, very profound implications that completely change the way we have built organizations, the way we have conceived our economy, capitalism itself, and even the nation state. And that's because, well, going back a bit in history, here is how it goes. At the beginning, we had companies that created some content, they created a product or something like that, and then the company earned revenue by doing so. I create a shoe, I sell a shoe, I earn from that. The next evolution was the Web 2.0, where we have social media and people create content, people create data, and then the company captures most of that value and benefit. However, with the decentralized autonomous organization, or DAO, what we have is that people create and people own. The company itself has become so thin and so distributed, so decentralized, that it's directly owned by the same people that are participating in the creation of value. Which means that instead of having a startup where a small group of people creates a product and then seeks a community to form around that product, whether including consumers and advocates and suppliers and so on, with DAOs that is turned on its head. And what we have at the beginning is a community, a group of people that can coordinate, share ideas and so on to create a product. And they do so mostly through using tokens and other mechanisms to distribute voting power between them and distribute decision-making power between them, which in turn also allows us to design the incentives, because we can have extreme control over how rewards are distributed, and we can do so programmatically. So we can start to iterate on governance. We can start to iterate the very concept of a democracy itself at the speed of software. And what we have right now is thousands of these organizations being operated, exploring alternatives to the idea of a democracy, exploring different ways to manage common resources, exploring ways to build products, to create ideas together, managing already over $1 trillion in assets, probably by now closer to $2 trillion, and growing very, very quickly. And so what DAOs promise, in a way, is shared ownership, where the creators of value, the consumers, the suppliers, the investors, are all blurred together into a single group of stakeholders, which is extraordinarily powerful because it aligns the incentives across all of these groups if we design them properly. And as well, allows for more inclusive governance, what I call multi-stakeholder governance, where all the different communities that need to come together to create an organization have a voice and a vote on how that organization is run. And the outcome of these is hyper-scalability, because every single person that comes in contact with this organization has an incentive, has a vested interest to improve how it operates, to improve what it does, to help it grow, help it scale, providing both capital and labor, whether it's marketing, telling friends, whether it's offering suggestions, whether it's offering code, whether it's offering any other sort of contribution that they can, that ends up aggregating into what everyone can accomplish together. And that's why what starts as a very simple transition into a digital organization ends up right now starting to become a complete revolution in the way we think our economy and even capitalism itself. Potentially one day, even changing the very concept of nation states through this iteration on governance that we're seeing. So thank you very much. I hope that inspires you to look a little bit more into this trend.
That was so interesting. And what I really picked up on is what you've mentioned about decentralization, about giving people back the responsibility. And I just want to say the transition that you've taken from being a chef to now being kind of C-suite in the tech world is amazing. So well done. And we can't wait to hear more of your story. So thank you so much. Daniel, before you leave, please do tell everyone, how can they connect with you? How can they follow you, and how can they find out more about the work that you're doing?
Sure, thank you very much. You can always connect with the organization at aragon.org, or you can connect with me directly either through my LinkedIn or danielospina.info. And feel free to send me a message. I'll be very happy to hear from you.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I know that everyone has enjoyed your session. I'm seeing the Twitter messages come in. Please do stay with us for a while just to go on Pirate Live and see what the questions are coming in. But if it's okay, I'm going to invite our next speaker in to do her lightning